Amara, Bayo, and Zuri had been wandering through the old market all morning, moving past stalls that sold worn-out fabrics, bright spices, and jars of dried herbs. The sun was high, and the air smelled of fried food, fresh fruit, and dust. The market was lively, with children running between the stalls and shopkeepers calling out their goods. But the three friends were not looking for food or clothes. They were looking for something unusual, something that might make their day exciting. Amara's eyes were sharp. She noticed every corner, every dark alley between the tall stalls. "Let's check that stall at the back," she suggested, pointing to a small, narrow shop almost hidden behind a row of baskets. "I think we haven't explored it yet." Bayo nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "I bet there's something cool in there. Maybe old coins or weird toys." Zuri laughed and followed them. "Or maybe magic," she said jokingly, though the idea made her heart beat a little faster. She liked thinking about magic even if it was only in stories. The shop they entered was small, almost too cramped for three people to stand comfortably. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Old jars lined the shelves, some filled with strange powders, others with liquids of many colors. The light was dim, coming only through a small window at the front of the shop. "Wow," Amara whispered, brushing her fingers across a dusty shelf. "Look at all these jars. I wonder what's inside them." Bayo leaned over and picked up a green jar with a cork. "Maybe it's a potion," he said, shaking it gently. "It smells weird. Like flowers and metal." Zuri laughed, but then her laughter stopped. Something caught her eye. At the back of the shop, behind a row of dusty jars, was a small bottle that seemed to glow softly. It wasn't a bright light, but a gentle, shimmering glow that seemed alive. It pulsed slightly like a heartbeat. "Guys," Zuri said, pointing. "Look at that bottle. It's glowing." Amara stepped closer, curiosity written all over her face. "I've never seen anything like it," she said. "Do you think it's special?" Bayo frowned. "Special? It's probably just some oil or colored water. Don't you think?" But even as he said it, he felt a small pull in his chest, a strange curiosity that made him step closer to the glowing bottle. The label on the bottle was old, with letters written in gold that shimmered in the dim light. It read clearly, "Drink me to restore youth." Amara's eyes widened. "Youth? Like, young again?" she whispered. The thought made her heart race. She and her friends were young already, but the idea of being even younger, full of energy and free from any worries, was tempting. Bayo laughed nervously. "Come on, Amara. It's probably fake. Some old man trying to sell a trick." But Zuri felt differently. She reached out her hand almost without thinking. "What if it works?" she said softly. "Imagine it, just for a day, to feel completely young and strong. No tiredness, no stress, just fun." Amara hesitated. She looked around the shop. The old man behind the counter was watching them. His face was wrinkled and pale, with eyes that seemed too sharp for his age. He leaned slightly forward, resting on a crooked wooden cane, and his gaze held a strange intensity. "Do not touch that," he said, his voice low and firm, echoing slightly in the small space. "Some things are not meant to be disturbed. Some desires can become dangerous." Bayo froze. "Dangerous? We're just looking," he said, a bit defensively. The old man's eyes narrowed. "Curiosity is fine, but greed is not. Some bottles do not hold what you think. Be careful what you wish for, children." Amara felt a chill run down her spine. His warning was serious, and it made the glowing bottle even more tempting. The thought of drinking it was thrilling and frightening at the same time. "Do we dare to try it?" she whispered to her friends. Zuri nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the bottle. "Just a sip. Just to see." Bayo hesitated. He could feel a sense of unease in his stomach, but he also felt a strange excitement. The pull of the bottle was strong. "Okay," he said quietly. "But just a little. Nothing big." They each took turns holding the bottle, feeling its strange warmth through the glass. Amara twisted the cork slowly and lifted the bottle to her lips first. The liquid inside glowed even brighter, and she felt a strange heat spreading through her fingers. She drank carefully, the liquid sliding down her throat, warm and sweet, like honey mixed with something else she couldn't name. Bayo and Zuri watched her with wide eyes, then one by one they took sips themselves. As soon as the liquid touched their lips, they felt a wave of warmth and energy rush through their bodies. It was as if their muscles were stretching, their skin tightening, and their minds suddenly clear and alert. Amara gasped, her heart racing. I feel amazing," she whispered. Her fingers tingled, her hair felt lighter, and her whole body buzzed with life. Bayo laughed, feeling stronger than ever. Whoa, this is incredible. I feel young, really young. Zuri twirled around, laughing and spinning, feeling as though she could leap to the ceiling. It's like magic, she said. Their laughter was nervous, excited, and a little scared all at once. For a few moments they simply stared at each other, amazed at the changes. Their faces looked smoother, their eyes brighter, and they felt free of all worry. The tiredness of previous days, the small aches, the worries, they were gone. But even as they laughed and reveled in their new strength, a strange feeling lingered. The old man watched silently, his face unreadable. His eyes were sharp and full of warning, but he said nothing. He only leaned on his cane and watched, waiting. Amara felt a small shiver run down her spine. "Do you think it's safe?" she asked quietly. Beo shrugged. "I don't know," he admitted. "It feels amazing. But there's something strange about it. Like, it's too good to be true." Zuri nodded. "Yeah, I feel it too. But it's so tempting. I don't want it to end." The old man spoke again, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Youth taken without earning always comes with a price. Remember this, children. Every sip, every desire, has consequences." They ignored his words, too caught up in the excitement of their transformation. Their curiosity, their greed, and their desire to feel young and powerful had taken over their minds. They laughed and ran around the shop, their energy endless, as if the world itself had opened up before them. But deep down, a tiny whisper of doubt began to grow in each of them. A small feeling, almost too quiet to notice, told them that something was not quite right. The warmth in their bodies was intoxicating, but they could not shake the sense that they had stepped into something far larger than themselves, something that they did not yet understand. By the time they left the shop, clutching the now empty bottle in their hands, the market seemed different. Colors were brighter, the air seemed fresher, and every sound was sharper. Their laughter echoed louder, and their steps felt lighter than ever before. Yet the old man's eyes followed them from the window, and his warning lingered in their minds. They did not know it yet, but the magic of the bottle would not come without a cost. Their joy and youth were only the beginning, and soon they would learn that every wish has a price, even one that seems too wonderful to refuse. The effects of the mysterious juice were immediate and astonishing. Almost as soon as Amara, Beo, and Zuri had finished drinking, a wave of warmth swept through their bodies, and they felt their muscles stretch, their minds sharpen, and their energy explode. It was a sensation unlike anything they had ever experienced before. The dull ache in Amara's knees disappeared, and the slight tension in Beo's shoulders vanished as if it had never existed. Zuri's tired eyes sparkled with a brightness that made her feel like she could see the world in a new way. Amara rushed to the mirror at the side of the room, hardly able to believe her own eyes. Her reflection stared back at her, smooth, youthful skin, a glowing complexion, and a face that looked years younger than she had ever imagined. She touched her cheeks softly, almost afraid the magic would vanish if she moved too quickly. Her long hair, which had started to show faint streaks of fatigue from long days and stress, now gleamed dark and healthy. I look amazing," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Beo, always eager to test his strength, flexed his arms experimentally. He had felt strong before, but now it was as if a new power had awakened within him. Every movement felt lighter, every step firmer, as though his body had been renewed from the inside out. He lifted a chair effortlessly and then twirled it over his head, laughing with pure joy. This is incredible. I feel like I could run forever." Zuri could barely contain her excitement. She twirled around the room, spinning and laughing, her heart pounding with exhilaration. The world seemed brighter, sharper, and more alive. "It's like everything is new. Everything is beautiful," she cried, her eyes shining. Her friends laughed with her, the sound of their voices echoing in the small shop, vibrant and free. For the first time in a long while, the three of them felt completely free. Their bodies were lighter, their minds sharper, and their senses more acute. They could hear the faintest sounds outside the shop, the flutter of bird wings, the distant chatter of children, the rustling of leaves in the wind. Colors seemed more vivid. The red of a cloth, the golden yellow of sunlight, and the deep green of the plants all appeared brighter and richer. Life felt sharper, more immediate, more thrilling. They spent the first few hours experimenting with their newfound energy. Amara tried running up the narrow stairway to the loft of the old shop, moving faster than she ever thought possible. Her friends watched in amazement as she leapt over crates and barrels effortlessly. Beo jumped onto a stack of empty boxes and landed with the grace of a trained athlete, his muscles strong and agile. Zuri spun in circles, her laughter ringing out as she seemed to float with every movement, her excitement contagious. By the afternoon, they had left the shop and wandered into the streets of the market. People looked at them in surprise, noticing their youthful appearances and the energy that seemed to radiate from them. Children stared with wide eyes and some shopkeepers called out, asking if the trio had been to the gym or used some new kind of medicine. Amara, Beo, and Zuri exchanged glances, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. They felt powerful and admired, as though the world itself had opened up to them in a new way. The days that followed felt like a dream. They ran through the streets and the fields outside the village, climbing trees, racing each other, and laughing until their stomachs ached. Every morning they woke full of energy, with bodies that did not ache and minds that were alert and focused. Even the smallest tasks seemed easier, and challenges they had previously found difficult now felt simple. Amara found herself solving problems quickly, Beo could lift heavy loads without effort, and Zuri's creativity and agility seemed limitless. At first, they reveled in their transformation without thought of consequences. They stayed out late, exploring the forests, racing across fields, and visiting friends who could not believe how young and energetic they had become. Every glance in a mirror brought smiles and laughter. They joked that the juice had made them nearly invincible. But soon, subtle changes began to show themselves. Beo noticed that although his strength had increased, his mind sometimes wandered strangely. He would forget small things like where he had placed his belongings or the order of events from the previous day. Amara too noticed minor gaps in her memory. Names and small details slipped from her mind in ways that had never happened before. Zuri's dreams became vivid and strange, filled with shadows and voices she could not understand. Despite these small warnings, the three of them ignored them. The thrill of youth was too intoxicating to question. They felt powerful, untouchable, and alive in ways they had never imagined. They ran faster, climbed higher, and laughed louder than they had in years. They felt the energy of youth running through every part of their bodies, making them forget the usual limits that age had imposed. One day, as they raced through a meadow outside the village, Amara paused to catch her breath and look around. "It's perfect," she said, her eyes scanning the bright flowers, the tall grass, and the distant trees swaying in the wind. "I haven't felt like this in my whole life. It's incredible." Beo grinned and flexed his arms. "I know. I feel like nothing can stop me now. I could run forever, climb anything, fight anything." Zuri laughed and twirled again, her long hair catching the sunlight. "And we look amazing doing it. People stare because they can see how alive we are." The three friends laughed together, caught up in their joy. It seemed as if nothing could harm them, nothing could slow them down. The juice had given them the gift of youth, and they were determined to enjoy it to the fullest. They ran into the nearby village, showing off their new energy to friends who could not believe the transformation. Children followed them, marveling at their speed and agility, while adults whispered about their youthful appearance. Yet, beneath the surface, the first seeds of worry began to grow. Amara noticed a fleeting dizziness as she turned quickly. Beo felt a strange tightness in his chest after lifting a particularly heavy branch, and Zuri's dreams began to whisper warnings in ways that left her unsettled. But they dismissed these signs, too caught up in the euphoria of youth to consider that something might be wrong. They continued their adventures for days. They climbed hills, explored forests, and swam in the river, feeling stronger and faster with every movement. The world seemed wide open, full of possibilities they had never imagined. Every sound, every color, every sensation felt sharper and more exciting than it had in years. Their laughter carried across the village, and even the old shopkeeper's warning became a distant memory, like a faint echo from another world. However, as the days stretched into a week, the changes became harder to ignore. Sometimes Amara would forget small details of conversations she had had moments before. Beo occasionally felt a sudden, unexplained fatigue despite his seemingly endless energy. Zuri began waking from dreams that felt more like warnings than dreams, with shadowy figures calling her name and urging her to remember something she could not understand. Despite this, the trio clung to their youth, enjoying every moment they could. They ran faster than ever, laughed harder than ever, and moved through the world as though it had become a playground. They felt unstoppable, and yet, unknowingly, the first hints of danger had begun to creep into their lives. Their transformation had been a miracle, yes, but one that carried an invisible weight. Each step they took, each laugh, each display of energy was a reminder that the juice had altered them in ways they could not yet comprehend. While their bodies were younger, their minds and spirits were beginning to feel small, strange shifts that hinted the cost of their miracle would soon reveal itself. For now, though, they were too caught up in the thrill of youth to notice. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri ran together across fields, through forests, and along the riverbank, laughing and shouting, feeling as though the world itself had been made for them alone. Every glance in the mirror confirmed the magic: smooth faces, bright eyes, and bodies full of energy. The juice had made them young, strong, and full of life, and for now that was enough. But even as they celebrated their transformation, a quiet, almost imperceptible feeling of unease hovered just beneath their joy. The world was brighter, faster, and more exciting than ever, but the gift of youth had come with a mystery they could not yet understand. And as their adventures continued, the first shadows of consequence began to stir quietly, waiting for the day when their perfect new life might demand a price. At first, Amara, Bayo, and Zuri were too caught up in the excitement of their newfound youth to notice anything unusual. Every day was full of laughter, adventure, and endless energy. They ran faster, climbed higher, and laughed louder than ever before. People in the village stared at them in amazement, wondering what had happened to make them so lively and full of life. But slowly little signs began to appear, small, almost invisible at first, but impossible to ignore once they started. Amara noticed the first oddity one morning while preparing breakfast. She had asked Bayo to bring her a knife from the counter, but when she turned to take it, she realized she had forgotten exactly what he had brought her. She frowned and tried to remember, her mind grasping at the memory like water slipping through her fingers. It was a small thing, almost trivial, but it made her pause. She had never forgotten something so quickly before. Bayo, at the same time, felt an unfamiliar dizziness while playing outside with Zuri. They had been racing across the fields, their laughter ringing through the air, when Bayo suddenly stopped, clutching his head. "Well, wait. I feel strange," he muttered, leaning against a tree for support. His vision wavered for a moment, and he felt the rush of energy that had once made him feel unstoppable now turning into something unsteady and unfamiliar. Zuri was the most sensitive to the changes. That night, as they all slept in Zuri's small room, she began to dream differently. Shadows moved across the walls of her mind, whispering warnings she could not fully understand. "Amara. Bayo, beware," a soft voice called in the darkness, almost too faint to hear, yet chilling. She woke suddenly, heart racing, unsure whether the whispers had been real or only in her imagination. The room was quiet, but a cold feeling lingered, like the breath of something unseen. When she told Amara and Bayo the next morning about her dreams, they laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it as imagination. "It's just a dream, Zuri," Amara said. "We're fine. Look at us, we're full of energy, young and strong. Nothing can go wrong." But the unease had already begun to settle in their hearts. During the day their energy still surged, making them feel invincible. They could run long distances, climb trees with ease, and even jump over fences and walls without effort. Villagers stared at them in amazement, unable to believe the speed, agility, and strength they now possessed. Yet at night exhaustion followed. Despite their youthful appearances, their bodies began to tire in ways they had never felt before. Amara would struggle to sleep, her mind racing with fleeting thoughts she could not grasp. Bayo found that even though he could lift heavy objects and run without effort during the day, he would wake up with aching muscles and a strange sense of weakness. Zuri's dreams continued to be strange and unsettling, filled with shadows and whispers that warned of consequences they could not yet understand. The first clear warning came when Amara tried to remember what they had done the day before. I can't remember," she said, her voice shaking. She tried to recall the small details of their adventures, where they had gone, what they had seen, but the memories slipped away like smoke. Bayo frowned, noticing the same thing happening to him. The joy of youth seemed to come at a cost. Zuri was terrified. One night, she awoke to find her room filled with faint shadows that seemed to move in the corners of her vision. She could hear whispering voices, almost calling her name, telling her to be careful, warning her of something she could not understand. She shook Amara and Bayo awake, but they were slow to rise, still groggy from the strange fatigue that had begun to grip them at night. "We need to figure this out," Zuri said, panic in her voice. "Something's wrong. This isn't just magic. It's dangerous." Amara tried to reassure her. "It's just the juice working in strange ways," she said. "Maybe it's balancing itself out. We'll be fine." Bayo, however, began to notice other strange signs. Sometimes he would find objects in places he did not remember putting them. Tools in his workshop would be moved, small things like coins or jars would be out of place. At first he thought it was forgetfulness, but then he realized it was something more. The juice had made them young, yes, but it seemed to be changing how their minds worked as well. Even during the day the friends began to feel tension growing between them. Minor arguments broke out over small things: who had taken a piece of fruit, who had left a door open, who had forgotten an errand. They had never fought like this before, and the energy that had once brought them together now sometimes sparked irritation and impatience. Their joy was still present, but it was mixed with something darker, something they could not name. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby forest, Zuri tripped over a root and fell hard. Her friends rushed to help her, but when they looked at her, she felt dizzy and confused. She could not remember where she had been running, what path they had taken, or even why she had chosen that route. Amara and Bayo experienced similar moments, fleeting lapses of memory that left them uneasy and afraid. The forest, once a place of fun and freedom, began to feel unfamiliar and dangerous. As the days passed, the strange effects grew stronger. Amara sometimes forgot people's names, even friends she had known for years. Bayo experienced sudden headaches and dizziness during activities he had done countless times before. Zuri's dreams became more vivid, with shadows that seemed almost real, whispering warnings that she could not interpret but instinctively feared. They began to realize that the juice's magic was not entirely a blessing. What had felt like a miracle, youth, energy, strength, was beginning to feel like a trap. Their bodies were young, but their minds and memories were slipping. Their nights were restless, haunted by exhaustion and strange visions. The juice had given them the gift of youth, but it had also awakened a hidden cost, one they could not yet measure. By the end of the week, the three friends were more cautious. They limited their adventures, trying to rest and recover from the exhaustion that followed every night. They still laughed and played during the day, but a quiet fear lingered in the back of their minds. They began to notice the small warnings from their dreams and the lapses in memory, and they realized that their carefree joy had a price they had not considered. Amara sat one evening, staring at the reflection in a puddle of water. "I feel different," she said softly. "It's not just that we're younger. It's something else. Something I don't understand." Bayo rubbed his temples, exhausted from the dizziness he had felt earlier. "Yeah, I know. Something's not right. It's like the juice gave us a gift, but it's also taking something away." Zuri shivered. "And the dreams, the shadows, they're not going away. I can hear them every night, whispering warnings we don't understand. We need to be careful. I think this isn't over." The three of them realized that they had entered a world they did not fully understand. The juice had made them young, yes, but it had also introduced danger into their lives. Their bodies were vibrant and alive, but their minds were no longer completely reliable. Every night brought exhaustion, dreams, and unease, and every day carried the tension of knowing that something hidden was affecting them in ways they could not see. Despite their fear, they could not help but enjoy the magic while it lasted. They still ran, laughed, and climbed with the energy of youth, but now their joy was tinged with anxiety. They began to watch each other more carefully, noticing the small lapses in memory, the dizziness, and the shadows in Zuri's dreams. They understood that their perfect youth might have consequences that were only beginning to show themselves. By the end of that week, Amara, Bayo, and Zuri had learned something important. What felt like a gift could also be a trap. Their youth was real, their strength and energy undeniable, but the strange side effects were a warning. They did not yet know the full cost of their transformation, but the first seeds of fear, doubt, and caution had taken root. What had seemed like magic was becoming something more complex, something they could not fully control. And deep in their hearts, each of them knew that the joy of youth, however powerful, could not last forever without revealing its hidden dangers. They had tasted the miracle, but they had also begun to glimpse the shadows that came with it, shadows that would shape the days and nights to come. The evening air was cool as Amara, Bayo, and Zuri sat together in Zuri's small room. The glow from a single candle flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and twist with every movement. The three friends were quiet, each lost in thoughts they could not fully express. Their laughter and energy, which had filled their days just a week ago, had faded into unease and worry. Amara picked up a small hand mirror from the table. She held it close and stared at her reflection. At first, she saw only the smooth skin, the bright eyes, and the youthful face she had dreamed of having. But then, slowly she began to notice other things. Pieces of herself, little fragments of memories, were missing. She could not recall small details about her morning routine, what she had eaten for breakfast, or even what she had been thinking a few minutes ago. The gaps in her memory were subtle at first, but now they were growing like cracks in a wall. Bayo noticed the same thing when he looked into the mirror beside hers. He flexed his arms as he often did to test his strength, but his mind seemed distant, distracted. The details of his childhood, small memories of his parents, and moments he had thought he would never forget were slipping away like water through his fingers. He blinked, trying to hold on to them, but they kept fading. Panic began to rise in his chest, a strange heat that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Zuri, standing behind them, shivered. She had been dreaming more vividly at night, the shadows in her mind whispering warnings she could not understand. Now she noticed that she could barely remember parts of her friends' stories, the moments they had shared just days ago. Faces of people she knew seemed hazy, names of places she had visited felt blurred. Something she had taken for granted, her memories, her sense of self, was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. They turned to each other, their eyes wide with fear. It's not free," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "This juice, it didn't just make us young. It's taking something from us. From our minds, from our memories, from our lives." Bayo sank onto the floor, resting his head in his hands. "I thought this would be amazing," he said quietly. "I thought it was a gift. But it's stealing parts of us. I don't know what I'm losing, but I can feel it. It's scary." Zuri sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around her knees. "And the dreams, the shadows, they're not just dreams. They're warnings. The juice, it's not magic. It's a trap. We've been too careless. We thought we were invincible, but we're not. Not at all." For the first time, the three friends felt the weight of what they had done. They had been blinded by the joy of youth, the excitement of energy and strength, and they had ignored the warnings from the very beginning. The shopkeeper's words, once dismissed as old and strange, now came back to them with terrifying clarity. Every sip, every desire, has consequences. Amara shivered, thinking of the small details she could no longer remember. Names, events, little moments she had treasured, all slipping away. She felt a pang of guilt and regret, knowing that the choice to drink the juice had not been harmless. Bayo and Zuri felt the same. Their laughter, their fun, their adventures, they were now tinged with fear. They realized that the gift they had eagerly taken came with a cost that could not easily be undone. They tried to think of a solution. Perhaps there was a way to reverse the effects, to restore what they had lost. They returned to the old market, hoping to find the shop and the shopkeeper who had warned them. But when they arrived, the narrow alley where the shop had been was empty. Dust and debris covered the ground as if the shop had never existed. No glowing bottle, no wise old man, nothing but the memory of a warning they had ignored. Bayo kicked at a small stone in frustration. "It's gone," he muttered, his voice tight with panic. "There's nothing we can do. We're trapped." Zuri's eyes filled with tears. "Trapped? And losing ourselves. Every day, every night, something is slipping away. I don't want to forget. I don't want to lose who I am." Amara reached for her friends, holding their hands tightly. "We can't give up. We need to try something, anything. There has to be a way to fix this." But even as she spoke, she felt the truth pressing down on her. The juice's magic was not something they could control. It had given them a gift, but it had also demanded payment. Their youth had been borrowed, and now the cost was becoming clear. Days passed as they tried to fight the effects. They tried to keep journals, to write down memories, to remind themselves of who they were. But even as they wrote, they realized parts of themselves were slipping away faster than they could record. The names of friends, small details of their homes, the laughter of past days, all were slowly fading. Each attempt to hold on only reminded them of what they had already lost. Exhaustion followed them relentlessly. Even with their youthful bodies, sleep brought no relief. Nightmares became routine, filled with shadowy figures that whispered warnings and threats. Sometimes they would wake in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, unsure if the whispers were real or only in their minds. The juice had given them energy during the day, but at night, it left them weak, vulnerable, and frightened. Their panic grew as they realized that they had underestimated the juice's power. What had seemed like a harmless thrill had become a trap. They had been so focused on the joy of youth that they had failed to notice the creeping danger. Now it was too late to ignore it. The transformation had been permanent in ways they did not fully understand. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri spent hours in silence, staring at their reflections. They looked young, healthy, and strong, but inside, something was missing. Their memories, their sense of self, their connection to the past, they were being taken from them. They understood, finally, that the juice had given them youth at the cost of time and identity. "I feel empty," Amara whispered one night, tears rolling down her cheeks. "We have our bodies, but not all of ourselves. Parts of me, my memories, my feelings, they're slipping away." Bayo's hands shook as he nodded. "Me too. I feel lighter, but not in a good way. It's like a part of me is gone. And I don't know how to get it back." Zuri hid her face in her hands. I thought we were safe. I thought we had magic. But it's evil in a way. It's taking what we love slowly without us realizing until it's too late. They realized with horror that the juice had no easy cure. No shop, no spell, no potion could undo what had been done. Their youth was real but borrowed. Every day that passed, every night that came, reminded them of what they had lost and what they were losing still. Panic and regret replaced laughter in their lives. Their carefree adventures were gone, replaced by careful steps and whispered fears. They no longer ran through fields or climbed trees with the joy of before. Instead, they sat together, silent, thinking about the choices that had brought them here. Amara thought of the old shopkeeper, his eyes full of warning. We should have listened, she said quietly. We ignored him, and now we're paying the price. Bayo shook his head. We wanted power, youth, but we didn't think about the cost. We didn't think about ourselves. And now we can't fix it. Zuri took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. We have to accept it even if we don't like it. We can't go back, but maybe we can be careful. Maybe we can hold on to what we still have left. And so, with heavy hearts, they faced the truth. The juice's gift was not free. Their youth came at a terrible cost. Memories, time, and pieces of their very selves were slipping away. They had chased a dream, but the dream had trapped them in a reality they could barely control. The laughter and joy they had once felt had been replaced by fear and regret, and there was no easy way to undo it. They learned in the quiet hours of that night, a lesson that would stay with them forever. Some desires come with a price too high to pay, and what seems like a miracle may hide a curse waiting to claim what you hold most dear. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri sat together in silence, holding hands, each feeling the weight of the gift they had taken. Their youthful bodies shone in the dim candlelight, but their hearts and minds carried the knowledge of what had been lost. The juice had made them young, but it had also taken parts of them that could never be restored. And as the candle flickered, casting shadows across the walls, they understood that the path ahead would not be easy. They had made a choice and now they had to live with it. The realization had come too late, and the consequences would follow them every day, a reminder of the night they drank the juice and paid the price for their wish. The morning air was cool and quiet as Amara, Bayo, and Zuri made their way back to the market. They walked slowly, their youthful faces and bodies belying the exhaustion and worry that weighed heavily on their minds. Days had passed since they first realized the cost of the mysterious juice, and the thrill of youth had been replaced with unease and fear. Their laughter no longer came easily, and their energy felt different, strained, almost forced. The streets of the market were bustling as usual. Shopkeepers called out their wares, children ran between stalls, and the scent of spices and cooked food filled the air. But the three friends barely noticed the colors and sounds around them. Their minds were focused on one goal: to find the shop and the old man who had sold them the glowing bottle. They needed answers, a way to undo the damage, or at the very least, some explanation for what had happened. Amara's heart raced as they approached the alley where the old shop had once stood. The space was empty now, just a narrow gap between two larger buildings. Dust covered the ground, and there was no sign that anyone had been there in weeks. No jars, no glowing bottles, no old shopkeeper leaning on his crooked cane. The shop had vanished, leaving nothing but a faint memory and the echo of a warning they had ignored. Bayo stopped in disbelief. It's gone, he muttered, kicking at a small stone on the ground. All of it gone. Just like it never existed. His voice trembled, though he tried to keep it steady. The shock of realizing there was no way to return to the source of their miracle hit him hard. Zuri sank onto the curb, burying her face in her hands. It's empty, she whispered, her voice shaking. The bottle, the shop, the man, all gone. There's nothing left. We're on our own. Her words were heavy with the despair that had been growing inside her for days. Amara placed a hand on Zuri's shoulder. We have to accept it, she said softly. We can't change what happened. We drank the juice and we have to live with it. Her voice was calm, but inside she felt the same fear and regret that gripped her friends. They had thought they could cheat time, gain a miracle without cost, and now they knew it was impossible. The three friends walked silently through the market, their steps slow and measured. The joy and freedom they had felt when first drinking the juice seemed like a distant memory. Their youthful bodies still moved with strength and grace, but their minds were tired. Each step reminded them of the parts of themselves they had lost. The memories, the small details of their lives, the sense of self that had been quietly eroded. As they passed familiar stalls, they noticed small details they had taken for granted before. A fruit seller's bright oranges, the smell of freshly baked bread, the laughter of children playing near a fountain. These things seemed sharper now but also fleeting, fragile. The realization hit them hard. Life was precious and the shortcuts they had taken had cost them dearly. Bayo looked at his reflection in a shop window. His face was smooth and youthful, his hair dark and full, but his eyes were tired. There was a weariness there that no mirror could hide. He touched his face and frowned. "We look fine," he said quietly, "but it doesn't feel fine. It doesn't feel like us." Amara nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "We wanted youth, but we didn't think about what we were giving up," she said. "It's not just about how we look. It's about who we are, what we remember, the life we've lived. And now, we've lost pieces of that." Zuri wiped a tear from her cheek. "I thought it would be amazing," she whispered. "I thought we would be happy forever. But, it's a curse. A curse we brought on ourselves." The three of them spent the day wandering the market trying to find some sense of normalcy, but it was impossible. Every corner, every sound, every smell reminded them of what they had done and the consequences they were facing. Even with their youthful faces and bodies, the joy that had once come so easily now felt heavy and hollow. By evening they found a quiet spot near the river on the edge of the village. They sat together watching the water flow past, each lost in their own thoughts. The reflection of the sunset on the rippling water reminded them of the passage of time, the time they could not reclaim no matter how young they appeared. Amara spoke first. "We have to be careful from now on," she said, her voice firm. "We can't chase shortcuts anymore. We have to live cautiously, think carefully about what we do, and never forget what happened." Bayo nodded. "Agreed," he said. "We've learned the hard way that some things, some miracles, come with a price too high to pay. We can't let ourselves be tempted again. Not by magic, not by anything that promises easy rewards." Zuri looked at her friends, a small, sad smile on her face. "We survived it," she said softly. "That's something. But we have to remember, always. Remember the juice, remember the cost, and remember ourselves." The days that followed were quiet. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri avoided the market alley, avoided thinking too much about the juice, and tried to live their lives normally. But the lessons they had learned stayed with them. Their youthful faces were a constant reminder of the choice they had made, and the exhaustion and worry beneath those faces were a shadow of the price they had paid. Sometimes, late at night, they would recall moments of laughter and excitement, the thrill of climbing trees, running across fields, and feeling unstoppable. But those memories were now tinged with regret. They had been warned and they had ignored the warning. Their curiosity and desire had led them into a trap, one that could not be reversed. The three friends continued to meet regularly, supporting each other and sharing the unspoken understanding of what they had experienced. They laughed sometimes, but the laughter was cautious, tempered by the knowledge that shortcuts to happiness, youth, or power were rarely without consequence. The juice had promised them a miracle and it had delivered, but it had also taken something far more valuable than they had imagined. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri learned to treasure the simple things in life: the warmth of the sun on their skin, the sound of birds in the morning, the taste of food, and the comfort of friends. They understood now that life's true value was not in appearances, but in experiences, memories, and the passage of time that made them unique. And though they could never reclaim the pieces of themselves that the juice had taken, they carried the lesson with them every day. They moved cautiously through life, aware of the dangers of greed and desire, understanding that some gifts, no matter how tempting, are too dangerous to pursue. The market, once a place of excitement and curiosity, became a symbol of their mistake. They no longer wandered through it carelessly. They watched it from a distance, remembering the shop, the old man, and the glowing bottle that had changed their lives forever. Amara often thought about the moments they had lost, and the memories that would never return. Bayo sometimes felt a pang of longing for the energy and joy they had experienced before the exhaustion set in. Zuri occasionally dreamt of shadows and whispers, a reminder that the cost of their choice was still with them. Yet together they survived. They had been warned, they had fallen into temptation, and they had paid the price. But they had learned, and that knowledge became a shield against further mistakes. They were careful now, living each day with thought and intention, guided by the memory of the juice and its consequences. Life went on as life always does. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri continued to grow, not just in youth but in understanding, patience, and wisdom. They carried their experiences quietly, using them to make better choices and to treasure what they had. The world remained full of temptations, but they had learned the value of caution, the importance of remembering lessons, and the dangers of shortcuts. Even as years passed, the memory of the juice, the shop, and the old man never left them. They would sometimes meet near the river, sit together in silence, and reflect on how close they had come to losing themselves entirely. And though they had their youthful appearances, beneath the surface was the quiet knowledge of the cost, a constant reminder of the night they drank the juice and the consequences that followed. Amara, Bayo, and Zuri had survived the temptation, but they were forever changed. Their youth remained, but it was no longer a source of careless joy. It was a reminder, a lesson, and a silent warning. From that day on, they lived cautiously, aware that some miracles, no matter how enticing, are curses in disguise. And though they never spoke of it to anyone else, the memory of the juice, the warnings, and the price they had paid stayed with them, guiding them in every choice, every moment, and every day of their lives.